Enjoying the conference? So am I. So I'm pretty intrigued by the talks we have seen this morning, and actually there is a common theme in those talks. Can anybody tell me what that was? Well, pretty much. It's actually automation, right? What we have seen is really end-to-end solutions, starting from the ingestion of the data until the operationalization of predictive analytics. So really tying those ends together. And typically, such done is work by data scientists, highly skilled people like you. But there is another trend in the market that we see, and that is really the emergence of data analysts and business analysts, that way before actually data scientists implement such end solutions, explore the opportunity to generate value on data. So they are taking some data and in an explorative fashion really generate some results, and try to figure out the value that can be generated from using predictive analytics. And those are not typically coming from a data science background, having a background in statistics or machine learning. But those are often business people now needing to work with the data, but not necessarily having the knowledge and not necessarily having the time actually to learn a complicated tool. And so this is a pretty large group of people actually, and even larger than the group of data scientists. And we want to embrace them much more. So obviously, as you have described this morning, RapidMiner offers really a good solution when it comes to automating things, so covering the full life cycle. But we have recognized that there is still some way to go to support this more explorative kind of work, right? Really iterating between ingesting data, taking data, generating some results, then going back to the data, going back and forth between data and results. Because when you build process, it really requires some imagination as you are building the process, how the result will look like. And we would really like to make this much easier and much more interactive to also support this kind of explorative work for the business analysts and, well, we call her Alison, as opposed to the data scientist, statistical Stan. So we would really like to have those, well, sort in terms of data science, less capable users focus more on extracting the insights than really to use or learn a tool, and doing that by reducing the lag and the necessity for abstraction between editing the processes and viewing the results on the one hand. But obviously, as it is such a powerful solution for data science, we don't want to sacrifice any of this huge power of RapidMiner, but basically satisfy both of the user groups. So the data analyst, Alison, on the one hand, and statistical Stan on the other hand. So a couple of things we would like to look at to actually facilitate this are done within a couple of UI initiatives. First of all, we would like to look at the data access, right? In RapidMiner, there are a couple of ways. So you can import data into the repository, you can drag in a read operator. There's even a special repository for database access. There are a couple of ways that might not be obvious, especially to beginner users. So, and one thing we would like to look at in the respect of making it easier to use the tool, we would like to look at the data access and try to unify the different ways and make it more obvious what you do. Then selecting operators, next steps in the process, is actually a quite complicated task if you don't know, well, what you would like to do, right? So you need to basically know the next step to go through the operator tree and figure out what operator to add next. So we would definitely like to simplify this user experience and have much more recommendation to the users in terms of what they should try out next. And we have started to do that stuff using the wisdom of crowds, what we will definitely continue to do to deliver on that, and therewith ultimately speed up the process building itself. And then finally, the last thing I already talked about is really making the relation between data and results and function in between, which somehow generates results on the data, much more interactive, right? Where you really see directly what happens without even executing the full process. So beyond UI, big data is the second big area of investment. So we are already doing a lot of stuff there. We are obviously having quite a good solution with Hadoop. And we have already introduced some Spark MLlib operators, since Spark obviously has a huge hype on the one hand, but also will probably manifest as a pretty capable and adopted solution. So we will definitely go down that route by adding more Spark MLlib operators. But also, since obviously data scientists are such an important group, and even more in the Hadoop space, programmers are really embedded in the whole process of doing analytics and generating value. We would like to embrace that and also add scripting capability for Spark, leveraging Python and R. More on the big data stuff, well, there are new technologies evolving constantly, coming up, new innovation, but some things are also going to standardize. And one thing that has already sort of standardized is actually Hive as the data warehouse layer on Hadoop. But still, Hive is going to acknowledge the new technologies like Spark, like Tez for Hortonworks. And we will definitely try to leverage that by adding support for Hive on Spark and Hive on Tez, just to make it more future-proof and capable of doing that stuff. Then, when dealing with Hadoop, the actual connection to Hadoop clusters is always an issue, right? Administrating that stuff, integrating with the Hadoop clusters, configuring it, that's actually a quite complex thing. And Hadoop is in particular such a good solution because we are actually covering a lot of that stuff under the hood, and we are trying to do even more about that, right? And so we will continuously deliver on trying to automate the deployment, trying to better integrate with Hortonworks, HTTP, Cloudera, CDH distributions, and making it more easy to connect to Hadoop clusters and such, delivering value from from big data more accessible. And we will probably also certify with, well, we have already certified with Cloudera, and we will move down that path also with Hortonworks. And then we have already delivered quite well on supporting security on Hadoop clusters. So if you had read maybe our white paper, there is a security model basically consisting of 4 stages, going from authentication, authorization, then data auditing to encryption. And we have basically covered the first 2 phases, right? So authentication and authorization. And we will definitely continue to deliver on that also, adding more capabilities in terms of data auditing and covering encryption as well. Then finally, a bit more down into the future. Well, sort of at the other end of the spectrum is obviously deploying results, just as Lars has mentioned. And one way of deployment is just visualizing the results. And there are definitely a couple of solutions that are pretty much adopted in the market, which are the solutions from ClickText, so ClickView and ClickSense, for which we already have an integration. But then there's also obviously Tableau, which is used quite often, and sort of similar to the integration with ClickText solutions, we will also add some capabilities definitely for Tableau there as well. And then coming a bit back to the analytics stuff, well, obviously predictive analytics really delivers a lot of value, right? But the next step, or the value is really just unlocked once you go into the path to actually have an action based on the insight, right? And that's often what is covered by the term prescriptive analytics. So you really try to prescribe an action. And often there are some analytical techniques that are used there, and those are in the areas of simulation and optimization. And we would definitely like to go into more into deployment, more into operationalization, invest there, and that will definitely come with us looking at simulation and optimization capabilities down the route. And finally, well, in terms of visualization capabilities, we definitely have some visualization capabilities both in Studio and Server. For Studio, those are mainly used to support the explorative process in terms of building the data mining, building the data predictive analytics process. Whereas in the web applications, those are more meant a bit in terms of the deployment phase, actually delivering the visualizations to end users. And those are just based on different technologies. And going further into the future, we will definitely have an eye on and evaluate whether to, well, migrate those two technologies into one solution and to deliver a common chart for both our Studio and web applications. So this is really just covering the great schemes of investment. If you have any feedback regarding those things, we are definitely happy to receive such feedback all the time. So just reach out to us.